Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Death Goat? Every now and again, I like to do a video on a silly game. And then some people like to get really serious about it. I don't like the fact that he made a video about this. I think he should have done a video on this instead. Something along those lines. Thankfully, I'm too metal to give a shit. Death Goat, brought to you by Terminal Press. It has the most metal menu you've ever seen, including credits spelt with a K, high scores with an umlaut above the O, and yes, you get the idea. Runic symbols. Also, the entire logo is barely legible, and everybody knows that barely legible logos are the hallmark of excellent death and black metal bands. The settings menu. It's metal. We don't need a settings menu, but they have one anyway. Goes up to 1920 by 1080, which, to be fair, is not as metal as it could be. I do prefer higher resolution metal where available. So that's a little bit of a black mark against this. Outside of that, you have separate audio sliders, all of which are extremely metal. Why? No. This game is a metal game. You don't turn the music down. What the hell is wrong with you? Listen to some Bieber. Well, these are the controls. Yes, quite. Which I do not believe you can rebind, which kind of sucks. You can skip track, but of course doing that would be blasphemous. Although blasphemy is pretty metal. WASD, space to boost, don't press that button, and right button to bomb. There's a few different power-ups, which are all named in a metal way. The Soul Ravager, Abyss of Agony, Searing Wound of Total Armageddon, which is a ballad, by the way, by famous black metal band I Impale You on a Spike and Sacrifice You to the God of the Goat Mountain. Alright, let us begin, and start the fucking carnage. Now, you get to pick a couple of different levels. They're basically just backgrounds, like the Wasteland, the Land of Frigid Solitude, and the City Abandoned. We'll start with the Wasteland, and you have characters: the Death Goat, the Death Witch, the Death Granny, the Death Kitty. And if you get enough points, which is like 1,000,000 points, you get the Death Tank. They all pretty much play the same. Let's pick the Death Goat. And now you get to pick the music. So, I admit to being unfamiliar with, I think, all of these bands, actually. Which is in itself pretty cool. Oh no, I'm not unfamiliar with God Forbid. I've heard of them. Let's go through here and see which ones I've heard of. Haven't heard of Vanisher. Well, I can't read that. And I have a lot of metal experience. Jorel, I think. Possibly Immortal Guardian. Oh, some power metal. Excellent. That's some cheese. Oh, we've got to do some cheese, absolutely. What else we got? Conqueruk, I believe. Conqueruk. You know, I'm liking a lot of this stuff, though. For those who don't know, like, I'm into most genres of metal. Stuff that I'm not into, probably the harder end of death metal. I do like melodic death metal and some technical death metal. And also, I'm not really into black metal at all. I never really understood that. Doom, maybe not that. Yeah, some more cheese. Holy Grail. Deathelhem. This actually has quite the soundtrack. I don't know of any of these bands, but all this music seems pretty good. Warforged. Something Autarky? The Raven Autarky, I think, is what that is. Tyrant of Death. There's quite the variety here, actually. I'm impressed. I thought it would just be a couple of different subgenres. There's actually quite a few represented here. Legion. Bloodshot something. Byzantine. I think I've heard of them. Nin. There we go, there's some black metal for you. Oh, that sounds of it. Extinction Level Event. That's quite the art, I like that. That's got that very Meshuggah pacing to it. It's like, time signatures? What are they? Look, nobody can read that. That's just, no. Stop it. Immediately. Oh, Leviathan, Kardashev, and back again to Aegeon, apparently. That's quite the selection. I like that. Let's do some cheese! Immortal Guardian. There we go. If it doesn't sound like your balls are in a vice, it's not power metal. Let's begin. Alright, so you remember how I said there was a boost button? This is the default movement speed, which is a little bit high, don't you think? just a tad, it does make the game a little bit tricky to control. Let's press boost. Oh, Jesus. And then die. That's why boost isn't good. You don't need to move this fast. It always makes me think, like, that there's some issue with, like, the frame rate, but everything else is moving at a normal speed. You know, let's say if they tied the speed of the game to the frame rate, and I'm running a silly high frame rate, which you would not do, like, at all in a game like this. That is a very, very newbie mistake. That might be why, but no, I think it just has an incredibly fast default movement speed for no apparent reason at all. I don't know why the boost button even exists. Anyway, it's your very standard top-down shooter affair. You shoot stuff, you pick up power-ups, you try not to die. You can take a couple of different hits on your shield before you die, and you got 3 lives, and you basically just kill things until you die. You have a particularly metal smart bomb, and you just keep fighting to your death while metal music plays in the background. That is literally it. There's really not a great deal else to talk about. Shooting-wise, it feels bog standard twin stick, kind of Crimson Lands-esque. Although, unfortunately, unlike something like Crimson Lands, it doesn't have the wealth of power-ups and, of course, things like Nation Red, which I will defend to the death because I think it's amazing, also have an incredible number of power-ups, which sort of keep things interesting. I mean, you've basically seen what the game has to offer there outside of the soundtrack. We'll switch out to that. We're going to play Death Kitty, and we choose to listen to... yeah, Dawn of Leviathan. There we go. Let's give that a shot. So this is the Death Kitty. Does exactly the same thing as all of the others. So no big surprises there. So, you might be thinking, well, this game looks pretty terrible. Well, I mean, I think it's got a couple of good points. So the art style is certainly very metal. There are some interesting looking creatures, I have to admit. The Skull Spider's meh, but a lot of the other stuff is kind of neat. So, I do like the art style, despite it being kind of basic and a little bit cartoony, you know. The game barely even has shadows, for God's sake. It definitely feels like a very basic Crimson Land clone. I'd also say that the game doesn't have anywhere near enough power-ups. I think if you're going to make a Crimson Land clone, you've got to load it full of interesting power-ups, and the game clearly has not done that. The movement speed of the character is frankly far too high, as far as I'm concerned. You're moving at a ludicrous speed. It's incredibly easy to accidentally run into an enemy. Why they even have a boost button, considering you run at 1,000,000 miles an hour in the first place, is a mystery to me. And the default weapon is fairly dull, and the drop rates seem to be relatively random when it comes to the power-ups. That said, it is a $3 game with a really cool soundtrack, and the way that I approach this game, especially as a metal fan, is that it's a game that you barely play. It's a game that I'm actually using to discover more music. And that, you know, that's actually become a problem for me over the last few years. I used to be very plugged into the metal scene. I used to go to a lot of gigs. You know, we had a huge number of gigs in the towns that I used to live in, especially at university. So I was able to keep track of it. And I used to run a metal show, so it was in my best interest. I was buying all the metal magazines with their cover CDs and everything back in the day to discover new music. It becomes a little bit harder to do that now, and you might think it's easy considering it's the internet age, but it's surprisingly not as easy to find the sort of music that I like. But this game is actually loaded with music that I think is actually pretty cool, so I'm treating this $3 game as a method to learn about and listen to new music. It's essentially an excuse to listen to music. It's kind of the way that I treat games like Audio Surf. You know, I don't necessarily like Audio Surf that much, but I do enjoy playing games like Audio Surf and Beat Hazard as an excuse to listen to more music. And I think it has value in that respect, and it is only $3. You know, it's not a terrible game, it's just incredibly basic. I think if they want to make it more enjoyable outside of the theme, which is good, you know, I like the fact that even their patch updates are full of the Kvalt language, which is sort of a running joke amongst the metal community, that everything that's black metal has to be intentionally misspelled with unnecessary umlauts and Ks and replacing U's with V's and such. You know, and that's cute, and anyone that's a metal fan will recognize that in-joke. If you're not, I mean, there's no reason to buy this whatsoever. There's no doubt about that. But as a game, it could certainly use a huge amount of improvement. If they throw a bunch more power-ups in it, and maybe they differentiate the different characters, maybe put some form of progression to keep you coming back to it. I think in the era of roguelite progression, not having something that you earn after the fact outside of that one character that I'm attempting to unlock with 1,000,000 points is a little unfortunate. So, again, it's an incredibly basic game. I wanted to cover it because, again, I'm into metal. I found the concept amusing, and the soundtrack's great. You can buy it separately, but it's worth picking it up for $3 just to listen to the soundtrack. That said, of course, you could just get the list of it and download the songs, listen to them on YouTube or whatever, but this has introduced me to a few new bands, and as a result, I'm kind of grateful for that. So, cute little game, lacking in many, many, many areas. Certainly a lot of room for improvement there. But I'm not going to say that I didn't enjoy playing it because I got to learn about new music, and that's always good for me. Death Goat, ladies and gentlemen, currently available on Steam for $3. $3 American dollars, or your regional equivalent to that. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, by all means, do feel free to click the like button. If you didn't, dislike button is right over there, and I shall see you next time.